The gavel struck, a sound that reverberated through the hushed courtroom, not just through the air, but through the very core of my being. Linda, my stepmother, had not only lost her audacious claim to my father's inheritance, but the echoes of her own cruelty, laid bare for all to hear, had become the undeniable catalyst for her utter undoing. It was a victory, sharp and clean, yet forged in a crucible of anguish I had carried for years. 6 months prior, my father had passed, a quiet Tuesday morning in March, ravaged by pancreatic cancer. His journey from diagnosis to grave spanned a brutal 8 months, an accelerated descent into illness that left little room for anything but sorrow. But the story of Linda's fall had begun long before that final breath, long before the legal battles, back when his illness first began to peel away the polite veneer of my stepmother. I was 28, and Dad had been gone for half a year when the will was finally settled. My own mother had died in a car accident when I was 16, leaving a gaping void in our small family. 2 years later, when Dad, a man of quiet strength, began dating Linda, a nurse from the hospital, I'd been wary. But I was heading to college, ready for my own life, and he deserved happiness. Linda, with her professional demeanor and seemingly caring nature, had offered a flicker of hope. They dated a year, married in a small ceremony, and I'd given her a chance, if only because my father was smiling again. For the first few years, a fragile peace held. Linda was always polite during my college breaks, though a genuine warmth never materialized between us. She performed the role of stepmother with an almost clinical detachment, a surface-level friendliness that always felt like a carefully constructed barrier. Still, she made my dad happy, and for me, that was enough. I graduated, secured a job as a logistics coordinator, and moved 2 hours away, maintaining a routine of bi-monthly visits and weekly phone calls, the quiet rhythm of a grown son and his father. Then, 3 years ago, the world shifted. Dad, at 61, received the diagnosis, stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The doctors offered cautious optimism, a chance at treatment. He began chemotherapy and radiation almost immediately, and my bi-monthly visits quickly became every weekend. I'd arrive Friday evening and leave Sunday afternoon, trying to be there, to help in any way I could. It was during these prolonged stays that the cracks in Linda's facade began to show. At first, it was subtle, a barely perceptible eye roll when Dad, weakened by treatment, asked for water, or an exaggerated sigh as he struggled to rise from the couch. Chemo had stolen his strength, leaving him perpetually exhausted, nauseous, and fragile. Basic human decency dictated compassion, but Linda acted as if his illness was a monumental inconvenience to her carefully curated life. I overheard her complaining to friends on the phone about having to babysit her husband, his terminal diagnosis reduced to a childcare chore that interfered with her yoga schedule. The word babysit ignited a slow burn of fury in me each time I heard it. Dad, ever the peacemaker, never confronted her. Perhaps the cancer had drained his will to fight, leaving him with no energy for marital discord on top of everything else. I tried once, cautiously, asking Linda if she was all right, if she needed help. Her smile was brittle, her assurance that she was just tired from work felt hollow. She was still working full-time, a registered nurse with 15 years in oncology, a fact that made her callousness even more egregious. She knew precisely what a cancer patient needed, the brutal realities of treatment, and what care entailed. She knew better. As the months dragged on, her attitude curdled. Impatience morphed into outright cruelty. She'd dismiss his pain as dramatic, tell him to toughen up, as if suffering was a choice. One Sunday morning, as I prepared to leave, I heard Dad's weakened voice from their bedroom, asking for help to the bathroom, dizzy from medication. Her sharp reply sliced through the wall, "You're not even trying. You just want me to wait on you hand and foot." And then, the sound that truly broke me, my father, a man who'd built houses with his bare hands, who'd raised me alone after my mother's death, apologizing. He was sorry for being difficult. That was the moment I knew a line had been crossed, a profound wrong had taken root. I began extending my stays, sometimes taking Thursdays off work to be there from evening until Monday morning. My company was understanding, allowing remote work. The more time I spent in that house, the more I witnessed Linda's true self, hidden from the world. She'd forget his prescriptions, feign surprise when his pain medication ran out. She'd cook for herself, claiming she thought he wasn't hungry, then criticize his eating habits. The television remote, a small symbol of control, was wielded like a weapon, refusing his simple requests to change the channel. It was a pattern of insidious, small cruelties, designed to make his already agonizing existence even harder. 18 months before his death, Dad's cancer progressed to stage 4. The doctors shifted their focus to comfort, to buying him what little time they could. The news hit us both hard. Linda's response was to retreat further. She took on longer hospital shifts, made more plans with friends, anything to avoid being home. Dad, meanwhile, grew weaker, needing more help with everything from dressing to meals. It was then I made the decision to move back, selling my apartment, putting my belongings in storage, and reclaiming my childhood bedroom. I told Dad I wanted to be there, but I also knew I needed to keep a vigilant eye on Linda. He tried to brush it off, saying I shouldn't put my life on hold, but the relief in his eyes was palpable. He was grateful for someone who genuinely gave a damn. Living there full-time, I saw everything. Linda was no longer merely neglectful, she was actively, verbally abusive. She mocked his sickness, called him pathetic, accused him of making himself sicker with his negativity. Once, I heard her tell him that my mother would be ashamed of his weakness. That time, I confronted her, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She played innocent, gaslighting me, claiming I'd misheard, that she was merely trying to motivate him. Dad, tragically, continued to defend her. She's under a lot of stress, he'd say, even as her words cut deeper. It killed me to watch him endure it, making excuses for a woman who treated him so cruelly. That's when I started recording. Not out of malice or manipulation, but from a gut-wrenching certainty that if I ever needed to prove what was happening, no one would believe me. Linda, the devoted nurse wife, was a master of public performance. I bought a small digital voice recorder and kept it on me constantly. I wasn't invading privacy, I was documenting abuse in common areas of my own home. And the things I captured were far worse than I had imagined. Hours of Linda's voice, sharpened. Venomous, wishing my father would die, screaming at him for spilling water, mocking him after an accident, confessing she'd married him only for financial security and couldn't wait for him to be gone. Every instance of neglect, every cruel word, every jab at his failing body. I meticulously organized it all, time-stamped, backed up, even transcribed the most damning parts. Part of me yearned to play it for her, to force her to confront her monstrous reflection, but I knew it would be futile. People like Linda don't suddenly find empathy. They just get better at hiding. I made one last attempt to reach Dad, telling him plainly that Linda was abusing him, that he didn't deserve it, offering to help him find a way out, counseling, separation, divorce, anything. He fell silent for a long time, then, in a voice heavy with resignation, said, "Son, I know what she's like. I'm not stupid." That admission, so stark and unexpected, was a fresh wound. I'd believed him to be in denial, too afraid to face the truth. But he knew. "Then why do you stay?" I'd asked, the question a raw ache in my throat. "Because I'm dying," he replied, simply. "And I'm tired of fighting. Everything is a fight now. The cancer, the treatment, my own body. I don't have energy to fight her, too. It's just easier to let her be angry and get through each day until this is over." It broke my heart all over again, a realization that my father had surrendered his dignity, accepting abuse as the price of a quiet passage. I told him I understood, even though I didn't, not truly. But I made him promise me one thing, that he would protect me in his will, ensure Linda couldn't profit from his death. "Already done," he'd said, a flicker of his old self returning. "Changed my will 3 months ago. Everything goes to you. The house, the life insurance, my retirement accounts. Linda gets nothing." He knew she would lose her mind, but by then, he said, it wouldn't matter. He'd also meticulously ensured his mental state was documented, his cognitive clarity noted by his oncologist, primary care physician, and a specialist. He knew Linda would challenge it. "I'm dying, but I'm not stupid," he'd repeated. "And I'm not going to let her profit off treating me like garbage." Dad died quietly, his hand in mine. Linda was at work. She cried on the phone when I called, 3 hours after he'd gone, and put on a spectacular show at the funeral, the grieving widow personified. People offered condolences, praising her devotion. Each word was a fresh insult, making me want to vomit. 2 weeks later, at the will reading, Linda arrived in solemn black, still playing the part. As the lawyer read the distribution of assets, her composure fractured. Everything, the house, the $400,000 life insurance, the $200,000 retirement accounts, his truck, his tools, went to me. Linda received not a single dollar. Her face cycled through shades of white and crimson. The lawyer, visibly uncomfortable, continued, reading a section my father had insisted upon, explicitly stating Linda's exclusion, confirming his sound mind and lack of coercion. "This is wrong," Linda cried, her voice trembling. "He was sick. He didn't know what he was doing." The lawyer, unflappable, stated, Mr. Patterson was evaluated by 3 separate physicians. All confirmed he was mentally competent. Dr. Reynolds, his oncologist, specifically noted his mental clarity just 2 weeks before his passing. Linda shot to her feet, her chair clattering backward. He had brain fog. He was confused. "This isn't legal. I'm contesting this." And with that, she stormed out. I sat there, a strange cocktail of satisfaction and sorrow swirling within me. Dad had kept his word. But I knew this was far from over. The lawyer looked at me, a grim assessment in his eyes. "She's absolutely going to challenge this. I hope you're prepared." I was. 6 weeks later, her lawsuit landed. It was exactly as we'd predicted. Dad wasn't of sound mind, cognitive decline, undue influence from me. The will should be thrown out, the estate hers. Her lawyer painted a vivid picture of me as the manipulative son, poisoning my father against his loving, devoted wife, who had sacrificed everything. A complete fiction, yet compelling on paper. My lawyer, Janet, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, specializing in estate litigation. Her first question was blunt: "Is there any truth to her claims?" "Zero," I said. "But I have something better than my word." That's when I told her about the recordings. Janet's eyes lit up. "This changes everything. Not only does it defend against her claim, but we can countersue for elder abuse. What she did to your father was illegal." And so we did. We filed a countersuit, elder abuse, emotional distress, and a host of other charges. The legal process dragged on for 8 months. Linda played the grieving widow on social media, posting old, happy photos, lamenting her loss and my supposed greed. Some, unaware of the truth, sympathized. But those who'd witnessed even a fraction of Dad's final months remained silent, knowing glimpses of the real Linda. Linda's lawyer tried every tactic, filing motions to delay, to have the recordings thrown out, arguing invasion of privacy. But Janet, armed with case law and precedent, dismantled every argument. We were in a one-party consent state. I was present for every recording made in my own home. It was all legal. Linda even tried the local news, portraying herself as the victim of a greedy stepson. The segment was a biased farce. Janet advised against retaliating in the media. "Fight it in court," she said, "where the evidence speaks for itself." While Linda raged publicly, I worked with Janet, meticulously organizing our evidence. The recordings were the centerpiece, but we had more: text messages from Linda complaining to friends about Dad, emails showing her making plans to leave town, asking neighbors to check on him instead of being there herself. Credit card statements revealed spa days and shopping trips while she claimed she couldn't afford help. We had testimony lined up from Dad's home health aide, who had kept detailed notes of Linda's neglect. Neighbors, too, had heard arguments, seen Linda abandon a struggling dad. Not everyone wanted to get involved, but enough agreed to testify that we had a solid backup. But the recordings were everything. They were Linda's own voice, an undeniable truth. The trial lasted 3 days, the longest of my life. Linda's lawyer began, painting Dad as mentally incompetent, me as the puppet master. His witnesses, Linda's friends, testified to Dad's confusion, but their visits were infrequent, and Janet expertly dismantled their amateur medical opinions. Linda herself took the stand for 4 hours, a masterclass in performative grief. She wept, spoke of her boundless love for Dad, her sacrifices as his caregiver, her devastation at being cut from the will. She was convincing, drawing sympathetic glances from some jurors. She presented herself as a saint, working full-time, managing his health, cooking, cleaning. She left out the abuse, the neglect, the constant humiliation. When she looked directly at me, implying I'd manipulated Dad, I gripped the armrest of my chair, my knuckles white. Her lawyer pressed, making my return home sound suspicious, a calculated move to isolate Dad. It took every ounce of my composure to remain silent. Then it was our turn. Janet called Dad's oncologist, Dr. Reynolds, who testified to Dad's sharp mind, his ability to make complex medical decisions right up to his final week. His primary care physician confirmed it, as did a neurologist who had specifically assessed Dad's mental state before the will change. Their medical expertise was unassailable. Then Janet spoke the words I'd been waiting for. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence recordings made by the plaintiff of the defendant's treatment of the deceased." Linda's face went utterly pale. Her lawyer erupted in objections, citing privacy, but the judge, citing one-party consent law, allowed it. Janet played a 45-minute compilation, the greatest hits of Linda's abuse, complete with timestamps and transcripts. Linda's voice filled the courtroom, sharp and accusatory. "I'm so sick of this. You're not even trying to get better. You just want to lie there and make me do everything. Dad's weak, tired apology, I'm sorry. The medication makes me dizzy. I just need help getting to the..." Linda's cutting response, "You always need something. I can't even go out with my friends without you calling me every 5 minutes. Do you know how pathetic that is?" The courtroom was eerily silent. I watched the jurors' faces, their expressions shifting from skepticism to disbelief, then to something akin to horror. Linda sat motionless, her face blank. Clip after clip, her words carved indelible marks, berating him, refusing help, mocking his accidents. The worst, near the end, was her screaming that she couldn't wait for him to die so she could finally live her life again. A juror gasped. By the time it ended, several people in the room were crying. Linda's lawyer looked as if he wished the floor would swallow him whole. Janet called me to the stand. I testified, calmly, factually, about witnessing Linda's abuse, my attempts to help Dad, and his heartbreaking resignation. I spoke of his explicit decision to change the will because he refused to let her profit from her cruelty. I remained composed, sticking to the facts, just as Janet had coached. Linda's lawyer tried to discredit me, suggesting I'd doctored the recordings or had an ulterior motive. But forensic analysis confirmed their authenticity, and the fact that Dad had changed his will before I began recording rendered his accusations baseless. He was grasping at straws, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. Janet's final witness was an elder abuse social worker, who testified about the clear patterns of abuse evident in the recordings, its profound emotional toll on my father. Then, we rested our case. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Their verdict was swift. Linda's claim of mental incompetence was rejected. The will stood. Everything went to me. But the judge, too, had been listening to those recordings. After the verdict, she called the attorneys to the bench. In a hushed conversation, a new chapter began. She then announced, her voice clear and firm, that based on the evidence, she was referring the matter to the district attorney's office for potential elder abuse prosecution and recommending a state board of nursing investigation into Linda's conduct. Linda's face went from pale to ashen. Her lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him. The evidence was irrefutable. I walked out of that courtroom, a monumental weight finally lifted. Janet, beaming, said it was better than she could have hoped. Linda tried to approach me in the hallway, but her lawyer quickly pulled her away. 2 weeks later, the DA filed formal felony charges against Linda, 1 count of elder abuse, 1 of emotional abuse of a vulnerable adult. Her nursing license was immediately suspended. She eventually took a plea deal, pleading guilty to 1 count of elder abuse, and was sentenced to 18 months in jail with 3 years probation. The nursing board, reviewing the same damning recordings, permanently revoked her license. She would never practice again. Linda served 14 months. By the time she was released, she had lost everything: her career, her reputation, her freedom. She tried to reach out through a mutual acquaintance, seeking an apology, amends. I didn't respond. Nothing she could say would erase what she had done. She had abused my father at his weakest, made his last months a living hell, then tried to steal the inheritance he had specifically left to me. The acquaintance persisted, describing Linda's struggles, her supposed remorse. Finally, I agreed to a meeting, if only to end the badgering. We met at a coffee shop. Prison had not been kind. Linda looked rough, older, defeated. She apologized, blaming the stress of caregiving for her actions. The classic excuse, blaming circumstances rather than taking responsibility. When she finished, I simply asked, "Did you come here hoping I'd give you some of the inheritance money?" The telltale shift in her eyes, the quick flicker of her gaze, confirmed it. The apology had been a preamble to a plea for cash. She started talking about her studio apartment, her minimum wage job, barely affording rent. I cut her off. "You had 9 years to be kind to my dad. You chose to be cruel instead. Every bad thing that happened to you is a direct result of choices you made. I don't owe you anything." I stood and left. I haven't heard from her since. The inheritance transformed my life. I paid off my student loans, bought a modest house, and invested the rest. Dad's truck stayed in my garage, a tangible piece of him. His tools, a lifetime of craftsmanship, I donated to a trade school program, knowing you would have loved that. My new house, with its 3 bedrooms and quiet yard, felt like a fresh start. I started a garden, just like Dad always had, growing tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, herbs. There's something grounding about hands in the dirt, a quiet way to honor his memory. The life insurance, that $400,000, granted me financial security for the first time. From living paycheck to paycheck, I could now breathe, make decisions not dictated by necessity, but by genuine desire. The house I grew up in, filled with the ghosts of Linda's cruelty, I sold. The money from that sale funded a scholarship at my old high school, named after Dad, for kids who'd lost a parent. I think of Dad often, wishing his final months had been peaceful, free from toxicity. But he made his choices, and I respect them. At least he had the last word. Sometimes, people ask if I feel bad about what happened to Linda, the jail time, the ruined career. The answer is no, not one bit. She made her choices, too. She chose to abuse a dying man, then tried to steal from his legacy. She could have been kind. She chose not to be. And choices have consequences. I'm doing well now. My job is stable, my home is my sanctuary. I visit Dad's grave every few months, bringing him coffee, pulling weeds, telling him about my life. I like to imagine he'd be proud of how I stood up for him, how I ensured his final wishes were honored, how I didn't let anyone profit from his pain. Linda is out of jail now, living somewhere on the other side of the state, working retail. She even tried to show up on my doorstep once, after her release, trying to insinuate herself back into my life, leveraging the ghost of Dad's name. I shut the door on her, then called Janet to document the harassment. Another time, Dr. Reynolds called, informing me Linda had tried to manipulate Dad's medical records at the hospital, attempting to retroactively portray him as mentally incompetent. They banned her from the premises for attempted fraud. A coworker of hers even reached out, revealing Linda had a history of being rough with elderly patients, that my father wasn't her only victim. Knowing it wasn't personal made it easier to accept. These days, Linda barely crosses my mind. I'm too busy living the life my father fought to give me. The inheritance, wisely invested, promises a comfortable future. Her probation ends next year, and while the DA inquired about potential concerns, I don't believe she'll bother me again. She tried every angle, and none of it worked. She had her choices, I made mine. And that, in the end, feels like a fair trade. But even with all the justice served, does true peace ever fully erase the scars left by such profound betrayal?